Thank you all so much for being here. So Professor David Smith is one of our own at the Carter School. He is a faculty member with us. He is also a career coach based in the Washington, D.C. area, focused on international peace building, development, policy, education, and humanitarian fields. He's also the president of the Forage Center for Peace Building and Humanitarian Education. He is a published author and he has won a U.S. Fulbright Scholar. He was previously a U.S. Fulbright Scholar teaching peace studies and alternative dispute resolution in Estonia. So, Professor David Smith, I will hand it over to you and
Thank,
you can get us started.
thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it. It's great to see everyone. So, before I have our panelists talk a little bit about themselves, I want to kind of set the context of what we've been doing at the Carter School so that you understand and realize that we've been doing this now since the beginning of the year, having these conversations, these career seminars. Today's focus, which is very exciting, is on mediation. And it's really, we're titling it On the Front Line of Conflict Resolution and Peace Building Mediation, because if I think of anyone who is on the front line of things, we're really talking about mediators. And I've spent many years as a mediator myself, and maybe at some point I talk about my own experience. But in the broader context, since January, we've been hosting monthly seminars looking at discrete areas within the conflict and peace building field where our graduates have opportunities. So we started the year looking at Ombud's work. We looked at social justice. We looked at working at the State Department. We looked at consulting. This will be our first content base. Last month we looked at resumes, but tonight this afternoon we're looking at mediation. On November the 12th, we will have a program on peace tech, looking at technology and people who are using and working in the technology field to advance peace building. And then on December 10th, we're going to look at genocide prevention, people who are working in that field, and how that relates to peace building work. We'll be bringing in some graduates to talk about their work. So it's very exciting. The format for today is that I'm going to briefly have each of our illustrious panelists just say a minute about themselves. Then we're going to go back and I'm going to ask them to talk more deeply about their work. Then we may have a little bit of a conversation, the four of us. But at the end, we will basically open it up for questions for you all, directed to all of us, directed to one of them, to talk about the field. Before I start, one of the things I recognize is that you're coming to this session because you think, or you believe, or you're curious about this really applied focus in conflict resolution work. We think about conflict resolution and peace building. Many people will focus on the theory or the research, but when we're talking about mediation, we're really talking about that work of getting in that space, of intervening, sitting down with individuals who often are not happy about the situation, are not happy with each other, but really, really need the work of a professional to sit down with them and help them sort it out in a sense and move forward. So we're going to be hearing from Gabe, Diana, and DG's experiences in doing that and getting you excited about that type of work. I find being mediator is very enriching and very, it takes all of you. It's kind of, you're really in the middle of something that really is often very exciting to watch as people start to figure it out. So let me go to each of you. I'm going to start with Diana. Diana, just give us about 30 seconds worth of your bio, and we'll go to Gabe and then DG, and then we'll go more deeply.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Ortiz. I graduated from the master program from the Carter School in 2016. And currently I'm working as a family mediator for the Multidoor Dispute Resolution Division at DC Superior Court. I mediate family cases, and I also train and mentor new mediators here at the court system. So I think for now.
Thank you, Diana. That's perfect. Thank you for being here. Gabe?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me as well. My name is Gabriel Herrera. I have I graduated in Carter School 2017, so just a year after Diana. I'm now in Chicago. I'm the Assistant Director of Mediation Services for the Center for Conflict Resolution, which is Chicago's Community Mediation Center. We do about 2,000 cases per year in both English and Spanish, either referred to us from the court system or folks on their own who would like to have a conversation with the help of a mediator. So that's what I'll say for now, but thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gigi. And my colleague and friend, DG.
Good morning. Thank you, David, for hosting this. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm DG Mawn. I have a Juris Doctorate. My pronouns are he, him, L. I am currently the president of the National Association for Mediation, and also had the privilege and pleasure of being a co-creator and professor with the school, the Carter School in particular, with their Contemporary Dispute Resolution Certificate.
Thank you, Gigi. So I'm going to go to you, Diana. I'm going to start it off the conversation. I'm really interested in what drew you to the work that you're doing. You know, why you want to be in that space. Can be not so comfortable at times, I would imagine. What your education did for you, right, in that respect. And anything else you want to add, you know, what advice you would give to other people, and how networking, I'm always interested in networking, how that has supported what you do.
Okay. So my interest for mediation started when I was in the program. I took several classes for mediation, facilitation, I mean, all of these ADR processes. But I realized that mediation was a great process that helped parties to reach agreements and avoid sometimes that other people decide for them, right? In my case, for example, I mediate family cases. I'm a full-time family mediator, so I mediate family cases about divorce or custody, parenting times, child support cases. I also mediate cases for child protection mediation, which includes a lot of professionals because these are the neglect cases for the district courts. And also I mediate truancy cases. So we have a partnership with the schools, DC public schools. So we mediate cases for that as well. So everything started when I was in the program, but then since I become interested in this process, I started working with the community mediation centers, specifically in Maryland, with the Conflict Resolution Center of Montgomery County. I did my basic mediation there, and I started mediating cases there. So that's the way that you can get practice with these programs. These are great programs for the communities.
You're mediating for the DC public, right?
Yeah, right now I mediate for the DC public. So all of these divorce cases, I mean, usually when the case comes to the court, they see the judge and in the initial hearing, and then they refer the parties to mediation. Because as we all know, the judges prefer that the parties agree by themselves instead of waiting for the judge to make a decision, which is great because usually parties who reach agreement in mediation are less likely to come back to court, or, I mean, agreements tend to last longer when they agree in mediation than when it's a court order. So that's the first thing that the parties do when they come to mediation. And then if they reach an agreement, I mean, they will avoid all of the trial. They will save time, and is of course a lot of money as well, because it's very expensive to go to trial, especially for divorce cases. So that's what we do in Multidoor. We mediate those type of cases.
Do you do this virtually or face-to-face or both?
So after the pandemic, we do most of the mediations online, virtual mediations. It depends if the parties request in-person mediation, we provide that as well. But most of the mediation now are done virtual.
Okay. And I'm just curious, you're a Latina, there's a large Spanish-speaking population in DC. How are you doing some mediations in Spanish?
Yes, we receive all type of cases, and I do both English and Spanish cases. We also have interpreters here for people who don't speak English. So for other languages, we provide that service as well. So all of the cases can come to mediation and they can mediate.
Okay. And you're a DC employee?
Yes, I'm a full-time employee with the DC courts. And as a staff family mediator. We have also volunteer mediators here. So in this program, we have only 3 staff mediators. And then we have like around 50 volunteer mediators that, they come to mediate family cases. And also for the civil branch, there are volunteer mediators as well.
I'm sorry, what was that for the what
For
branch?
the civil, small claims.
Civil branch. Okay. Okay. So you're just one of 3 mediators. That's amazing.
3 staff mediators in the
staff mediators.
Multidoor.
I'm curious. For many years I was a divorce mediator, right? And so this was, divorce mediation was something lawyers could do and no one else could do it. And now that's changed. Yeah. But you have to get some training and some certification and so forth. So up and beyond the degree at the Carter School, what have you had to do from a training or certification standpoint to allow you to do family mediation issues? Just curious.
That's a great question, because yes, we need, one thing is a basic mediation training that we can take. Is like some programs is 40 hours and some other programs are less than that. But then it depends on the type of mediation that you want to do. You need to take more training. So after I graduated from the school, I was able to join NVMS. I don't know if some people are familiar with that, Northern Virginia Mediation Services. So I was working there as a family programs manager, but I was able to take training because they provide great training for this field. So the training that I took there was for family mediation, because then you have to be very specific of the type of mediation that you want to take. So I took some training for family mediations and also district court. So I was able to get the certification with the state of Virginia to mediate these cases. So I'm also certified with them for circuit court family. So I can mediate divorce cases, and for the juvenile domestic relations, so I can mediate custody cases. So depending of the type of case that you want to mediate, you have to take extra training to mediate this type of cases. For example, for divorce cases, you need to take a training for property issues. It will involve division of assets and liabilities. So you need to take a training to be familiar with how the division of assets can be. That includes a lot of things, real property, retirements, debt. A lot of things that you need to be aware and familiar with so you can mediate this type of cases.
So one last question. What do you find most meaningful about your work?
For me, is to help parties to explore all of the possibilities that they have. Usually, when they come to mediation, they don't even know what mediation is, some of them. So one thing is to educate them about how this process works and how helpful it can be for them, right? And start exploring the possibilities that they have. And even if they don't reach an agreement, I think when they come to mediation, they go to the judge with a different perspective. They learn how to communicate a little bit better. So I think that is very meaningful for me. And even the judges have mentioned that here, that after, in the initial hearings, the parties goes with only one position about what they want. But after mediation, the perspective change, because they can see that there are a lot of things that they can work together, and they may request a different thing. So for me, of course, if they reach an agreement, that's great. But it's not only about the agreement, it's the way that they go through this process. They learn to communicate, they learn how to deal with this type of situations. And then, they can move from there, in the future.
I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna add one more question. I would imagine it's a very emotional process, even for you. that people are coming to you that are distraught at times.
Yes, these, especially family mediations, are very emotional.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have learned how to to deal with my own biases and things like that. I mean, I have to remain impartial in these type of cases.
Yeah.
Some cases are very difficult to remain impartial, but yeah, I mean, that's my role. And some cases, the parties come, you enter the session and you leave you leave the session drained. I mean, it's very emotional for not only for the parties, but as for the mediators as well. So you need time to decompress a little bit after the sessions, because it could be, as I mentioned at the beginning, we mediate also CPM cases, child protection mediation. So sometimes those cases are very harsh, the neglect, abuse cases, or those cases that go for adoptions. It has a very high emotional component that as a mediators we need to learn how to deal with it.
Right. Well, thank you. Treat yourself well afterwards. Have a latte and go for a walk and so forth. So I'm going to turn to Gabe. Same thing, Gabe. Tell me about why you like that work, and anything you want to talk about.
Sure. So I feel very lucky that I was introduced to the world of mediation at a very young age. I had a guidance counselor in middle school that started a peer mediation program and tapped me to be a part of that program. So I was exposed to this world very early. And then, I studied communication when I was an undergrad. I taught abroad for a little while, and I thought I wanted to do the Master's International program, which at the time, I don't know if it's still true, but the Carter School offered to do the Peace Corps, and I wanted to think about how I can make a career out of mediation. It's something that I'd been doing, as something that I loved for a while. And I started taking classes on facilitation skills, somatic skills, reflective practice. And then I really wanted to continue. And I actually decided to not pursue the Peace Corps. I'd done an internship with them. I taught abroad already. And I thought I want to like jump right in and get into the field. So I actually, similar to Diana, I was with CRCMIC, the Conflict Resolution Center of Montgomery County. Got the 40-hour training there and volunteered as a mediator for a while. And then there was an opportunity to get trained in Chicago at the Center for Conflict Resolution, also 40-hour training. So in the course of 6 months, I did 2 40-hour trainings. But what's nice about the one that I did with CRCMIC, Diane, I don't know if it was true for you, it was a bilingual training. So it was both in English and Spanish. And certainly shortly after my training in Chicago, there was a position that opened up. And so I relocated and moved from the East Coast to Illinois. And what we do is very similar, Diana. It sounds like the work that you do, with a couple of really important differences. So we are volunteer run. So we have the staff has grown a lot over the past couple of years, but we are still a pretty small organization, about 20. And we rely on about 180 volunteer mediators to help us do the work that we do. And we do get family cases that are referred to us from the courts, but we don't do divorce mediation. There are very specialized mediators, many of whom have law backgrounds or the specialized training. They know how to do property, division of assets, all of that. But what we do mostly is parenting agreements. So they will first go to a court-based program called Family Mediation Services to develop like their first parenting agreement. And then there's language in there that says, if a modification needs to be made, contact the Center for Conflict Resolution. So a parenting agreement that's made when the kid is 5 obviously needs to be changed and modified many, many times before they turn 18. So we do that. We also work with juvenile court, so individuals that are arrested for a misdemeanor crime for the first time to go through like a diversion program. We have the opportunity to mediate between them and the harmed party, or sometimes just a family mediation. We also do civil trial and small claims cases as well, and a lot of landlord-tenant eviction cases, especially after the pandemic. That was a huge caseload that came our way. And then folks just in the community, right? We've had individuals call us saying, hey, I'm having a hard time with my sibling, my mother, my next door neighbor, whoever it might be. And I think we would really benefit from a mediation. And it's always voluntary. It's always free. And kind of like what you were saying, Diana, we get to educate the public a bit about the benefits of mediation. A lot of folks don't realize that just by sitting down and elaborating each other's narratives and understanding a bit more about what's fueling their positions, they might have a lot more in common than they think initially. And so I really love to watch and witness that, the kind of path they go on from, there's no way I could ever sit down to have a conversation with this person, to actually, we are working together. This is actually going in a positive direction. It doesn't always happen that way, but we see it a lot.
That's great. You know, I always think about when I've done community mediation, and it's a lot of that. Well, you know, there are 3 parking spots in front of our house. How come you're taking all 3 of them, right?
Yes.
Or that tree. How come that tree is? Or you're making too much noise. That used to be the substance of community mediation, but these centers are doing much more than that now, right? I mean, it's the parenting and these other things were not part of the original mandate of community mediation. And maybe DG can help us understand that a little bit, but now it is in many instances, right? You're doing that.
Yeah, and even organizations like other nonprofits will call us up and say, hey, we're struggling. We're having some issues regarding employee relations.
Yeah.
How can we get some help? And then our organization also does trainings as well.
Right,
So,
right.
you know, we'll go into organizations and do a how to have a difficult conversations workshop, things along those lines as well.
Yeah, and I know you've been doing a lot of training. You've kind of moved within the organization, and now are you still doing frontline mediation, or you're doing mostly training of mediators now?
Both. I want to make sure that I keep my skills always, you
Yeah.
know, fresh, and I'm practicing them, but a bit of both. And I also am an adjunct professor at Roosevelt University in Chicago. I teach the practicum course there on conflict and mediation. They have a graduate program, and it's funny because a lot of the students end up working at CCR, so it's kind of this nice
Wow.
pipeline that we've developed.
You got to keep
But
the pipeline's got to continue to the master's degree program at George Mason. Remember that.
Yes. But yeah, I try to do as much of both, but I love training, but I also love mediating. I kind of forget that time exists. I forget about the world. I forget about myself when I'm in a mediation session. Diane, I don't know how long your parenting mediations go, but my longest was 6 hours and it felt like 10 minutes. You just get sucked into the world of these people.
Well, what you're talking about is the notion of flow. People, at least my students know flow because I talk about it in terms of positive psychology. It's like being in this experience and getting lost in it. And it's just so meaningful. And all of a sudden you look at the clock and say, I've been doing this for 2 hours. What happened? But it's so enriching and so powerful to you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm inspired by all of the parties that I work with. Even if they don't reach an agreement, just seeing like the movement and the way that they're able to think outside of their own position is really incredible.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about mediation. I'm going to go to DG now, but the idea that we often think, well, what's success in mediation? Say, well, there's an agreement. And I would say, I don't know about that, right? The success can be measured in many different ways. And sometimes people are walking out with no agreement, but their success just the same. And that's the thing that often is hard to make the argument for in mediation, but we know it's very much there. So thanks, Gabe. DG, so tell us about your work. Make some reflections, give us some reflection what Gabe and Diana were talking about. Tell us what the field is like.
Thank you, David, and thank you. It's hard to follow both Diane and Gabe because they've given such personal stories about the impact of the work they're doing both in the district and in Chicago. My work is to support people and centers like where Gabe works and where Diana works as the president of the National Association for Mediation and working with GMU. I think something I do want to clarify in this process is that there is a distinction between mediation and community mediation. And when our centers were created through the 1964 Civil Rights Act, they used the word mediate. The federal government clearly was aware what mediation is. They've been doing it since the 1840s. They legislated it in the 1870s and chose not to put it in our enabling legislation. So we have always been challenged to do much more than what courts view mediation to be, but to really set up systems where people can find their balance. And so when David and Gabe talked about sometimes they don't have a resolution, they do. And the resolution is that balance. It may not be an agreement that a court may want to enforce. It may not be an agreement at all, but it is a place where people can finally see each other, believe they've been seen, they've been heard, they're able to co-create whatever choice they wish to do with the issue in front of them. And that has always been our call. We've always had a yin and yang with the court system, many times with the system wanting us to be very defined. This is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is the training you need, this is training you don't need, and our call to be part of the community. Where if any of you are working in your community or have large families or small families, you know, it is always messy. And there are always gray areas. And there's always one way to work with one sibling and another way to work with another. And that's what we do at Community Mediation, and really help people co-create their justice, their peace, their engagement on 3 levels: the intrapersonal with themselves. It is amazing when you help people experience being heard or seen, a healing goes on within themselves. It's also interpersonal with the people they're in conflict with, the people that they're having challenges with. And then for us in community mediation, it's also organizational. How do the systems, seen and unseen, facilitate conflict intentionally or unintentionally? And how can we help those systems change those structures? So it's a huge gamut of looking at where conflict comes from and how to embrace it as a positive, as a growth producing process, not something that is going to harm you and slow you down. Those are my initial reflections, David, based on what I was hearing.
That's great, DG. Let me ask you a question. You and I have been in this business a while. Remember, we're old dogs or whatever we want to call ourselves. How have things changed in the field of mediation or community mediation in the last 30 years? And where do you think the future is going to be? And think in the future in terms of people who want to work in the field. Like, how do the people in this room prepare for the future? So where have we come from, and what's the future going to look like?
I'm going to take the latter part of the question of how should people prepare. I think to ask yourself, do people naturally go to you when they have issues or conflicts or concerns? So are you someone that's really able to hear a diversity of perspectives where you help people discover the value and not be so focused on what is the truth? If you are naturally that way, then I think you're meant to be a community mediator or a mediator as we train at the Carter School. It is something you're born with. It is not something I think you can learn. It is something you can sharpen. It is something you can get better at. It is something you can learn different techniques, different way of seeing things, different languages, if you will, so you know what to speak and how to speak to get people to begin to reveal themselves, to get people to really go below that surface disagreement. David mentioned the tree in the yard or the fence, to the more deeper disagreement. You never talk with me. I can't rely on you. Well, then let's really talk about that. So I think the first thing is to recognize, do you have that natural skill? If you do, then sharpen it, and would certainly encourage you to look at the programs at the Carter School and the things that we offer. Certainly encourage you to look at Contemporary Dispute Resolution Certificate to see if that's something that can help you be more impactful at what you do, whether you're an ombudsman, whether you're working in HR, whether you're a pastor or a rabbi or an imam. If you are someone that people go to help them resolve a challenge, then this may be something you can come to really learn. How do I sharpen that and get that to a place that I'm better at what I'm doing? And so I think the future is always going closer to that vision. And the vision for us is the beloved community, a community where everyone is welcome, everyone is seen, everyone feels a part of. So how can you be a part of co-creating that beloved community and knowing that it's always one reach further than where you are? It is always a continual process of regenerative growth and of evolution.
Are there any initiatives you see on the horizon? I know NAFCM's been involved in some things that you find really exciting? Like, boy, this is an exciting thing that we're going into right now that you can share with us.
I find all of it, I find myself to be a rather blessed person, David, that I get to sit in this chair, that I get to represent at this point over 319 centers around North America, US, and Canada, one of them being Gabe's, that they entrust me to amplify the work they're doing, to aggregate their wisdom and to advance their work. So I say lean in. The moment today is on one hand no different than 1964.
Okay.
There's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of distrust for a lot of institutions. And yet it is also different than 1964. We have significant income inequality today that we didn't have back then that needs to be addressed. So reach in and lean into the opportunity. I think we have that more today than in 64. In 64, only certain people that looked a certain way with a certain education could do this work. And today, if this is an innate, beautiful skill that you have, then use it. Use that skill to lean in and help your family, your friends, your neighbors, your community, your city, your county, state, your country really evolve to that evolution where we all are seen and we all feel that we belong.
Yeah, that's great. Why don't we move to questions then? I was going to have a conversation, but maybe the questions will create a conversation with us. So just go ahead and open your mic. DG, Diana, and Gabe, keep your mics open. And whoever has a question, just open the mic because I can see you right here and I can see when you open your mic. So let's take a couple questions, and they can be to all three of our panelists or just one of them. Maybe giving the other ones a chance to take a bite of it also. So questions. Maybe about how to start working as a mediator. Oh, and I've got so many students in here. My students should be able to ask a question. Come on.
Hi, can I?
Yes.
So I'm from
Abdul Rahman.
Yemen.
Yes, Abdul Rahman. Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm a PhD student. This is my second year, and I am from Yemen. And I completely agree with the DG Mawn. Is that mediation? It's also something that you nurture from your childhood. So I belong to uh, tribal leadership family. So yeah, I have learned a lot about mediation, and I also participated in many of the prisoner exchange between the two conflict actors in Yemen. And it's also about, the successful of any mediation is about the interest of those two parties if they are wanted to have this kind of dealings between them, no matter how educated and uh, uh, intelligent you are as a mediator. It always depends on those at the table wants to do something or not. What I'm saying is that for me, as a person who might be interested to do a mediation in the US, it's very different culture because mediation, let's say in Yemen or maybe in the global south, I don't know about other countries, but it's also about the way that we approach mediation, which is somehow mixed with arbitration. So you actually propose a solution that both like willing to accept or not. And I don't know how could I really learn the way that mediation work in the US, as the culture is completely different. So is there any resources that I can use, maybe trainings, links to trainings that I can take to learn how things really work here in the US?
Yeah. Let me just say one thing before I open it up. One of the things I would say, Abdul Rahman, is that we're not a monocultural culture in the United States in some respects. Sometimes we think of it that way, but different communities have different cultures in a sense, and that reflects the work that needs to be done. So you know, maybe thinking a little bit about that a little bit. But DG, Diana, Gabe, what would you add?
I was looking for Gabe because you asked about training. So I thought it was a great opening, Gabe, to market your training.
Sure thing. I was
Hi, Gabe. Hi, Gabe.
about to post a link here, so give me 1 second while I load that. But I mean, there's all different. I think so. You're talking about, you know, you mentioned arbitration. You also talked about mediation. I think it's important to note that there's different kinds of mediation as well, right? So at my center, what we focus on is facilitative mediation. So the mediator's never weighing in, they're never giving their opinion, they're never influencing the process. They're asking open-ended questions to get the parties to think so they can on their own create a plan that works for them. We're all about self-determination of the parties. But there's also evaluative mediation. Where the mediator does weigh in and does try and give an answer. There's transformative mediation, right? Where it's all about trying to change the relationship between the parties. So I think getting exposure maybe to the different kinds of mediation could help in terms of, oh, I find that this kind of mediation resonates with me in the work that I'm trying to do. So if you're interested at all in facilitative mediation, I'm going to go ahead and put some links in the chat here, maybe while my fellow panelists are speaking, because I want to make sure I get the right links in. But at the Center for Conflict Resolution, that's the kind of mediation that we do specifically, is facilitative. So I might, you know, look into the different kinds.
And this is virtual training, Gabe?
We have both virtual and in-person options, yes.
There's also on the NAFCM page, you can go to trainings, and there are 12 centers trained in community mediation, because even if you do evaluative or transformative, the focus and the decision at the end of the day are the people in the conflict. They still need to own it. So even if you're giving suggestions, this is what I'm hearing, it is not giving an answer. That is when you're moving over to arbitration and saying, here's how I think you need to resolve it. So please look at Chicago's. They're great. They're one of the 12 in our booklet. But you also have 11 others. And my recommendation to folks is to call each of them, talk with them, see what they offer, see what would inspire you or what inform you, and then move forward with their training process.
Diana, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, here in DC, in Multidoor, we offer training. I mean, it's usually when we need mediators that we tend to train like a good roster of mediators, like usually it's 20 mediators every 2 years or something like that for family mediation and also for small claims. But that's something that we don't advertise, like when you can go to the website and see it, only when we have the need of recruiting mediations. But if someone is interested, they can send me an email, and when I hear from any training, I can provide the information to them. Yeah. And I will leave my email address in the chat.
Abdul Rahman, I'm assuming you're in the DC area. You're in the Arlington campus, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah, and the last thing I would say is that you need to talk to mediators and learn what they do. So informational interviews are really helpful, which you may be able to get them by doing some of this training. So let me go to Jamal. Jamal, how are you? Good to see you.
Hello, Mr. Smith. How are you? Yeah, so I guess I had a question related to, I don't know, kind of like next steps for things. Because I've been doing mediation for a while. I've been doing it mostly through like restorative justice. I work with an organ called DC Peace Team. I've done a number of different facilitations with either peace circles, victim offender dialogues, and the like. And I don't have like a legal background at all, but now I'm starting to think that maybe this is kind of the major overlap where it exists. So I guess I'm curious as to like how important and relevant do you think it would be to kind of gain that experience? Because I'm in the program now here. I'm finishing a degree in conflict analysis. I have more experience in education than anything else, but as I'm thinking about transitioning in my career, I'm thinking maybe because the legal structure seems to have the most access to restorative justice opportunities, that may be the next step. But I don't know.
Are you thinking law school?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I want to do law school. It's like that's the question.
That's a deep thought.
Is it necessary? Is it useful?
All right, I'll shut up. Gabe, Diana, DG, what do you think?
What I wanted to jump in with was first praise the work that the DC Peace Team does.
Oh,
You do amazing work, not only in the district, but you're also a leader for a lot of peace teams around the country. And I've gotten to know a lot of the folks that you work with through the Trust Network. So thank you, Jamal, for what you're doing with the DC Peace Team. It really is making a difference, and did not want to let that just sit there. As far as your inquiry, I would start with David says, talk to other lawyers. I went to law school because I don't find the justice system fairly just, and I wanted to learn the language all these people got to speak, so I could be able to speak that language as well. So that may be a drive for you to go to law school or not. I think talking to folks will help guide you on that situation. I also would be very aware and encourage you to be aware of what is movement. There is a movement among a minority of current House representatives to make doing restorative justice illegal in any place that receives federal funds. So a part of the work also helps us know how to facilitate those types of conversations to stay in the nonpartisan lane, but to still be able to help people stay focused on being able to use a tool that really does assist them in the process. So that would be my initial thing. And I'm sorry, I know I jumped Diana and Gabe, and Diana, it looks like you're ready to jump in. I just wanted to make sure I got that praise for the DCP's team. You all are wonderful.
I love DCP's team too. I know people who do that work. Diana.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, it's not required to have a legal background for mediation if that's something that you would like to do in the future. I mean, my bachelor's is in psychology, and then I did a master's in conflict resolution, and I've been doing mediation for around 10 years now. But I mean, if you have that legal background, it's great to have the understanding, right, of what may happen in court in case parties end up there, or what type of options or topics they may need to discuss in a mediation. However, again, it's not something that is required, because you are going to be wearing your mediator hat, not your attorney or legal hat, right? And that in that way, the same like Gabe, we mediate in a facilitated type of mediation. So we don't provide any suggestions or options or recommendations or anything like that. So it's good for you to have that knowledge, but it's something that you cannot provide, because you cannot give a legal advice during mediation. If that's what you would like to continue doing mediation, yeah, it's not something that is going to be required for you in the next steps.
Yeah, and Jamal, I understand the space that you're currently in. I remember wondering if I needed to pursue law school as well to be able to have a career in mediation. I opted for community mediation, which is where I think like my heart is and where my passion is. But obviously, I think depending on the kind of mediation, certainly we have cases that are more financial or chancery court or probate court where they do need a lawyer with a very specific kind of training and lens that they can use to apply to the mediation. So for those cases, we do need attorneys, but I will say that in the years that I've been mediating since the Carter School, I have not had a situation where I did not feel prepared and would have otherwise felt prepared had I gone to law school. So I hope that is helpful. I find that the thing that has helped me the most is being a curious person. The mediators that are the most successful at our organization are ones that have a number of different life experiences, right? And we're trying as much as possible to diversify our mediator pool, and the more lived experiences that our mediators bring to the table that better match the communities that we serve, that's more important to us than having someone that has a certain degree. And so I would just keep that in mind. As Diana was saying, we're not offering advice, we're not making any kind of recommendations, but I think a curiosity for why people think the way that they do and how to help people, better understand each other is more important than having a degree or going to, to law school specifically. But that's my own opinion.
Thanks, Gabe. We can never underestimate the value of a really good question. Right, that's the curiosity in mediators, right? And that really is essential, I think, in good practice. So, thank you, Jamal. Any other questions? Just open your mic. Oh, I see a lot of students I know here. Someone's going to open their mic and ask another
I did
question.
have a secondary part to this question, but I don't know if
Yes,
there
go
might be
Jamal.
anyone else. Okay, so
Get a
that's
second bite to the apple.
no, this is actually really helpful because the reason I was debating lawsuit is one, because a lot of the work is in the legal sector. And I've kind of been asked to advise on like I was at the White House last week and we were doing a circle related to like restorative justice and peace circles when it came to gun violence. I had an opportunity to chat with a couple people from the OAG office here. I don't remember which one's which. I know there's an attorney office of general attorney, and there's another attorney general. I don't know. My friend who is in law school, she gets angry at me every time. But also the other half to this is like the piece on advocacy. I think what I'm realizing now, even as I hear these responses, like, yeah, there's the work of mediation and there's the work for like advocacy that kind of comes through mediation. And some of that advocacy is just informing people that mediation exists as an alternative path. But then also the other half of it is kind of like pushing policy. And so one of the OAG things, because I was working with Impact Justice and we were trying to get the restorative process to be applied to adults, but then there's this large pushback and then the project kind of fell through. And so I don't know, I guess in terms of mediation by itself, I guess it's good to know that I already have the skills for that, just given the number of years I've been doing this. But I guess in terms of like the political advocacy, kind of even responding to the pushback on federal funds, like does that require more? I don't know.
DG, you're shaking your head a lot.
Yeah, because I'm still formulating my question. I don't know.
DG, you got to weigh in on this.
David, is because when we want to say amen, we shake our heads a lot. So it was just I was agreeing more with Jamal than feeling the need to respond.
Okay.
So yeah.
Totally open to response because I'm not really sure where I'm landing this bird. But the point being is like the other reason for getting into law is because there comes the constant push with people in power who just don't want to use the restorative processes, the mentality of like people can be returned to a community without needing to be banished for 1,000 years.
And I can tell you, Jamal, that may be your situation in DC, and Diana can speak to that more clearly. We have community centers on the country that are using restorative practices with adults, in particular with returning adults. And so, matter of fact, one of our centers in Pennsylvania has moved to have the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, look at restorative practice as part of the experience of when you leave confinement and are part of the probation and parole system. And so centers are being asked to use that practice. And those people are adults. So if you're feeling only youth can do it, it may be a district thing as opposed to, and because the district is so controlled by the federal government, it gets all twisted. You can just drive a few miles north of Pennsylvania and be able to do the work you're dreaming of doing with adults. And I can tell you from her work and the initial evaluation, it has been so effective that there are judicial systems in some of the most conservative parts of Pennsylvania funding to have restorative justice be used with these adults. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you vote or how you come down on a question, you do believe that jail should be a last resort. And if there's a way to help adults grow in a manner, being empowered in a manner so jail is not something they're facing again, everyone supports that. And so, again, to underscore what David said, every community is different. Every state in the United States is different. Every province in Canada is different. Find the place that allows you to grow and relocate there. From my friends in Pennsylvania, they say the Commonwealth is special and like no other. So that may be an option for you. So don't feel hemmed in by exactly where you are would be my comment.
Thanks, DG. Diana or Gabe, you want to add to that, or maybe we'll take another question either way. Okay, let's get another question in. See if we can get one more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank you for asking a great question. Lots of conversation there. Okay, another question. I still have a lot of students in this room. I'm just going to pick on a student. I don't want to do that. Somebody come up with a question.
Yes. Hi, everybody. This is really informative and helpful. I guess I have a few questions, but first I'm curious to hear, like, how you prepare for each mediation. And I guess I just assume that with your experience and practice, you get a sense for what the different dynamics are of the different types of mediations. But I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that as well, if possible.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah. I think for me, what's really important is to ensure that I am in the right headspace, because I'm in a role now where I am training and mediating and working a lot on the admin team. I can sometimes feel the need to rush from one thing to the next, but I make sure that's never the case when I'm going to mediation. And even though I have seen similar dynamics play out in certain case types, I have to remind myself each time that just because I'm mediating another landlord-tenant case does not mean that this case is going to look anything like the last landlord-tenant case that I have mediated. So going into it with really an understanding and appreciation for the uniqueness of the conflict, I think is really important. One of the things that I'm really proud of at CCR that we do is that each of our mediators, including staff, we both get briefed and debriefed for every mediation that we do. So the brief is about a 30-minute conversation in advance of the mediation, where we talk about what we know regarding the case, and sometimes we don't know a whole lot. But talking about, what have I done recently in my mediation practice? What am I working on? What am I trying to do more of or less of? And it really is a practice. You'll hear me use that word a lot because the mediator that I am today is so different than the mediator that I was 7 years ago. And I want to continue to grow in this practice. So taking that time, making sure that I am taking care of myself and then able to get into the right headspace. And then what I'm also really proud of is that at CCR, the mediators are never alone. So I always have a lifeline, someone that I can reach out to, whether that's in person or virtually, that can provide support in between pieces of the process. So we go into a caucus, which is the private session we have individually at the parties, and sometimes to just bounce ideas off of the case manager or the person that's there to provide support before I go into the next section is really, really helpful. So you never feel that you're truly alone. I don't know that that's possible at all mediation centers, but it's a best practice that I'm really, really proud of, to make sure that you could just have someone else to think through things so you don't feel like you are doing this in isolation.
So it's not quite a co-mediation. It's like a mediator and a half kind of thing.
Correct. Someone that's there to provide support, whatever that looks like.
That's great. Diana, how do you prepare?
I always, as Gabe was saying, every case is different, right? So you just need to enter the mediation with an open mind and with a lot of curiosity. So you will ask a lot of questions and get information. Because even though we do an intake here, a very thorough intake in Multidoor, I may read the notes, but I prefer to go with the curiosity and ask them the question and for them to tell me exactly what they want to discuss in mediation. Because both of them, if it's not a domestic violence case, because when it's a domestic violence, we mediate in a shuttle mediation, so they don't see each other. But when they're together in the room, they may say different things that they say in intake. So it's always important to go through mediation, ask a lot of questions. That's a key. Questions are your best friend in mediation, because you can get a lot of information and you can frame questions that make the parties differently or just move them from the positions to what is really important to them. So I may read the notes, but just briefly, and then I go to the mediation with the intention of helping the parties to move using questions and mediation skills. So that's how I do it. And also we, as Gabe was saying, we have a team here. So if there is a very complex case or something like that, we always meet, we debrief about cases. Of course, confidentiality is very important, but here as a team, we all know that principle that everything is confidential, but that we help each other with debriefing this type of cases, especially those that are very complex cases that we may need to hear how they may do that if they have that case or something like that. So it's basically the 3 staff mediators. We always debrief with our supervisor.
Yeah, I think debriefing is critical. Reflection is critical. Debriefing is critical. But let me pick up before I go to DG, something that you said that I was curious about. See, you are doing domestic violence because it used to be in the early days, we would never do domestic violence in mediation, but you're doing domestic violence. And how's that different? Tell me again.
So yeah, we had in our program, we do IPV cases, which means that there is any domestic violence issue, there is CPOs in place. So what we do here is that the parties may not see each other. So now it's easier because we're in Zoom, right? So I create breakout rooms so the parties cannot see each other because, there are issues of intimidation, controlling, and things like that.
Sure.
So we make sure that the mediator goes back and forth between the parties. This type of mediation stays longer because usually, sorry, I don't know what happened. Usually, you have to talk to each party and do the same process twice, basically, right? But we are very careful with that. If there is an in-person mediation, we also take precautions here. So we make sure that parties don't cross on the hall. So we always try to schedule them in a different times. So they arrive in a different time and we put each party in a different room and the mediator do the same thing, but just walk to different rooms so the parties don't see each other. Yeah, and the screening that we do is we ask a lot of questions. We do the MASIC. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that. So it's like a 45 minutes screening for domestic violence, but it's very important because, we see a lot of cases with domestic violence and we need to make sure that the parties don't, that they are comfortable. Mediation is a safe space.
Right.
And they need to be comfortable in mediation. So if they are in the mediation with someone that they feel intimidated, they're not going to participate the same way. So that's why we do this as well here.
Thank you. DG, any reflections of what they said? And then we're going to go through and ask you all to give me your pearly wisdom at the end, what you would recommend to people. DG.
I would underscore everything both of them said. I want to highlight also to make sure you're checking your own biases. There's no such thing as being non-judgmental. We judge everything every day and every moment. So make sure you're aware of them before you go in. And if your bias is going to block you from being curious, as Diana said, from listening, from not saying, yet this is another eviction case, like Gabe said, it's to make sure you're checking on you. And that's where we really support co-mediation, because you may not be aware of your bias until all of a sudden the story starts unfolding and I can't hold this space. And it's really good to know that you have that co-mediator, hopefully can continue the process.
Yeah, co-mediation I think is really important. All right, I'm going to start with Gabe, Diana, then DG. And I'm going to ask you if you can put some contact information in the chat. That would be great, any way that people could contact you. But Gabe, what's your you're sending them off advice? What would you tell them as you're going out in the world, what's good advice for them?
Yeah, I think just from my own experience, when I was wrapping up at the Carter School and starting my career, I said yes to every opportunity that presented itself, paid and unpaid. I've done some incredible co-facilitations, co-mediations, large group facilitations, small community mediations at schools between students, right? All kinds of things that I didn't know if that was necessarily the kind of work that I wanted to do. But I said yes. So that was with CRICMIC in Maryland and then in Chicago. And then I relocated to Chicago, even though it was a city that wasn't necessarily on my radar at the time. And I'm so happy with that decision. So say yes to everything that comes your way, because something is going to stick, or you might learn something about yourself or about the work that you're interested in doing you might have otherwise not have known. So that worked really well for me. And then also lean in on your network. I was very fortunate to have some opportunities. Professor Smith was very kind in helping me identify what some of those opportunities were. So use your circle, network, and say yes to every opportunity.
Yeah, I remember there was bilingual Spanish mediation going on in Montgomery County. I don't think it was going on anywhere else, but training and the future is Spanish, right? We all recognize that in this country. So learn a second language if you haven't done it already. The panelists don't have to because they all speak Spanish, but I don't. Diana, what would you give good advice?
Well, I mean, I will go with my own experience. When I started this program, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do because conflict resolution is a field with so many possibilities. We can talk about international conflict, domestic conflict, and then ADR practices or processes. So I will say define what you really want to do, and if it's mediation, what you really want to do, because there are other ADR practices, facilitation, coaching, all of that, right? But if it's mediation or any other of these practices, as Gabe said, you just go and try to get the experience, and the way to get the experience is, as I did, it was volunteer work in a community center. You get the training that you need. That will give you the experience, because one thing is taking classes or the theory, and the other thing is the practice. And you will be a great mediator if you can practice with and put in service all of the skills that you get from the training, and get the opportunity to meet with people and help people. So yeah, that's the way, because I did the same. I said yes to most of the things. I went to the community at the Creekmec, then Virginia, and now I'm in DC, but they're still mediating in all 3 states. So that's the way that you should go. And yeah, if this is what you want to do, you may be ending up opening your own practice of mediation. You don't know what the future will bring for you, but that's something that you can just, probably envision, and that you will get. But yeah, you will need to get involved in mediation as much as you can.
Thanks, Diana. DG, and there was a question by Satoria about recognizing your biases. Maybe you could address that, DG, before you give your last advice. How do you recognize?
I didn't see the question.
That was in the chat. It was in the chat. She asked about that. How do you recognize your biases?
How do you recognize your biases?
Yeah.
For me, it would be to make sure you take time to breathe and look at yourself, that every situation you're in, you have contributed to the good and the not so good experience of it. So check in and say, how did I contribute to that? How did I not? Something I used to teach people a lifetime ago is that if you always think everything Diana says is brilliant, but you think everything Gabe says is ridiculous, then pretend what Diana's saying is coming out of Gabe's mouth. And then the inverse, pretend what's coming out of Gabe's mouth is coming out of Diana's mouth. And then ask yourself, do I still think it's brilliant? If the answer is yes, then it must be. If the answer is no, then what is your bias about Gabe? And the inverse, what's your bias about Diana? It's the best way to figure out for yourself what they are, become aware of them. And in my mind, sometimes you can't change them, but you can modulate them. You can change the impact they have in both your life and others. I hope that was an answer. If you want to know more, please email me. I'd love to talk about it. My last pearls, I don't know if I can do any better than Dan and Gabe did, is to always, and I generally don't say always and never, but I'm going to do it here, always believe in yourself. No one is as amazing, as wonderful, as unique as you are. Believe in you, and then never negotiate your non-negotiables. Know what are your non-negotiables and walk away if you're being asked to negotiate them. It can be scary. It is very freeing, actually. And most importantly, make sure that your circle of support lifts you up and doesn't cage you in. So really, those would be the 3 things I would leave with. And a thank you, David, for, of course, convening this and bringing this together. I've never met Diana or Gabe with these students, so this has been a pleasure.
Thank you, DG. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Gabe. And most importantly, thank you all for taking some time off in the middle of your day to learn about their work, to think about this important frontline work in mediation. Thank you also for Tim for doing the technical part of this. So in closing, just to let you know, this was recorded. It will be posted on our website. Our website includes a number of other sessions that we've had since January that you can go back and look at. This is on mediation. We did one in January and doing ombuds work. There is a connection there, of course, but if that's your field, then go to listen to that. Mediation, these are all important things to look at. So my thank you to all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Look for this recording to be posted, and we'll go from there. Thank you.